the Evolution Security Podcast. Welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast, where we give you the knowledge and live training to protect yourself, your family, and your country. This episode is brought to you in part by Tenacor. Tenacor is an American design, development, manufacturing, and training company building products that work. They are innovators that come from a law enforcement and training background with years of experience. We would specifically suggest that you look at the new Velo 4 AWIB holster. Everyone on this podcast owns one and uses it regularly. For 10% off your purchase, use the code EvoSec at checkout. That's EVOSEC at checkout for 10% off. Lastly, if you like what you hear here, please give us a review. It really helps to keep up our ratings and get the word out to others. You can find us online on Instagram at EvoSec USA and Facebook, also EvoSec USA, or visit our website, evosec.org. That's evosec.org, where you can find bios of the staff and links to upcoming events and trainings. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. It's Brian here, along with Aaron and Eric Davis. How you doing, guys?
Doing great. Good to see you again, Brian.
Man, good to get together. Yeah. Yeah, and for those who don't know, when we do these, we're not in the same space, but we do get to at least look at each other on the computer screen. So it's kind of nice to say when we see each other, although we're not in person. It's kind of cool. So, speaking of which, see Eric over there has got a book in his hand, and it appears to be a book by Brian Enos. Did you want to share something with us out of there?
Yes, sir. And I think this is timely because of the incredible guest we have this evening. So here we go. If you replace your thoughts with pictures, then when you see what you want to see, your body flows without thought. So again, that's Brian Enos, and that's from Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals. Excellent book. And what's funny is when we were thinking about our guest, who we have a masterclass discussion in visualization, I thought it'd be cool to kind of open up with a quote from a person that has an incredible chapter in here on visualization. And I open it up to probably something I circled and underlined 14 years ago or so. And I thought it was kind of cool. So what's your thought on that quote there, Brian?
Well, one, want to just shout out to that author. If anyone is unaware of Brian Enos, look him up and Enos forums. And if you were a shooter looking for any, question on skill or tactic, it's going to be covered on his forum. And there's definitely just a huge body of knowledge out there. But on the visualization piece, it's amazing how important that is and how often I forget to do it. So it's a good reminder.
Me too.
It's a good reminder because, and I mean, this is essential for shooting at higher levels, but it goes into everything. I've had to, do meetings with, superiors, and I've just sat down and thought about how that meeting's going to go and how I'm going to react. And having played that out in my mind, it's way better than just hitting it off the cuff with no practice. So visualization is huge. And, we will talk about that a little bit more in our upcoming interview. But, what do you got on that, Aaron?
With my lessons, with Mike Brown, one of the keys, I think I said this when we had him on, but he said, no matter how much he tells students when he's coaching or large classes about visualization, that it is the key to performance, to the next level, to the higher level. He says no one ever does it. And for me, I'm still working on it. In my last few matches, I definitely tried my best to do as perfect a visualization as I could of at least 2 targets, because that's the level that I can deeply visualize. But man, I can't wait for our audience to hear what our guest has to say about it, because I was blown away. But yeah, I'm looking forward to delving into it more myself. Back to you guys.
Nice. Cool stuff, man. Do you have anything to add there, Eric?
Yeah, I'll just double down on the importance, and I allude to some of this in the discussion with our great interview, but it really boils down to when I was truthfully competitive, back when I trained with Mike Brown many years ago. I was really on top of visualization, and in and of itself, it's a practice. And I had fallen out of it, even though I started competing recently again over the last couple of years. I have not been doing it good enough. So again, from this discussion, it's on the major push again. So, but I guess Brian, if you want to bring this in, man.
Cool. Well, we have the wonderful opportunity of having another great guest, as we have had many. But man, this I'm really impressed at how we've been able to capture some awesome talent, and this guy definitely sits in there with the best of them. So, without further ado, let's move into our interview with Mr. Mike Seeklander. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm here with Eric and Aaron as usual, and we have a wonderful guest for you tonight. We have Mike Seeklander with the American Warrior Society, owner of Shooting Performance, and of course, involved with that AWS program, and we'll talk more about that. But hey, I'd just like to welcome you to the show there, Mike.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
You know, this is probably something you get a lot, but of course, we always got to try and bring our listeners up to speed. And for our audience that doesn't know you, because the three of us know you, or at least know of your work and follow you very closely, as should all of our listeners, tell us a bit about yourself and how, you kind of got to be where you are today.
Man, it's funny you asked that, because as you're kind of formulating the question, I'm thinking, I've been asked this before, and when I start to answer, this is the real truth. When I start to answer, I hear myself talking, and I'm like, man, I have bounced around and done so many different things. So the audience is going to either go, man, this guy has really got some great experiences. He went to the next level in many different areas, or I can't hold down a job. So really, it's funny when it comes across like that. Anyways, so the shorter version of my bio is, I grew up out west in Wyoming and Idaho, spent a lot of time in the mountains hunting and trapping and fishing and doing all kinds of stuff. My dad is a former Marine, so I joined the Marine Corps in 1990. Very shortly thereafter, Desert Storm and Shield kicked off, and I volunteered to be in a unit that was going to be deployed, or actually was deployed. I was actually supposed to be an 0331 machine gunner in the Marine Corps, and in boot camp, tested apparently high on a bunch of different tests. They said, hey, you're a pretty smart guy. We're going to give you presidential support. And that fell through because of, I don't know, whatever Marine Corps stuff. They ended up shuffling me into intelligence. So I was an intel specialist, analyst. So I ended up deploying in Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990, 91, and then spent 4 years active. Actually closer to 6 years active, because I did some what's called active duty special work, which was counter-drug missions in Los Angeles. And after the Marine Corps, got into law enforcement, did some local stuff with the county in Knox County Sheriff's Office, then went to the Knoxville Police Department. And then later on, after 9/11, I became a credentialed Federal Air Marshal after helping run the training program, literally post 9/11. I was hired, my first day was December 29th, 2001. And kind of during that period, guys, I was shooting and training like a maniac, competing, wanting to be as good as I possibly can or could. So basically my tactical law enforcement, whatever you want to call it, career was always parallel in my competitive career. And then fast forward to today where I've ran a couple training organizations, was a FLETC instructor, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center instructor, came out to run the U.S. Shooting Academy, and now I own my own companies in Tulsa, Oklahoma area, travel and teach, shoot professionally for Wilson Combat. Like I said, I told you, it's like I can't hold down a job.
Well, I think you just have too many talents to restrict them all to one location. There you
I like your style, man. Let's coin that. Let me write that down.
Yeah. Well, Eric, I think you wanted to follow up on some of that.
Yeah, very much. Thank you for your service in both the United States Marines, your service in the FAMs, and of course what you do now as far as contributing to the shooting community and, emphasizing the defensive community as well. So thank you very much. And by the way, I was Army myself, but my son is Lance Corporal Davis. He's a United States Marine as well. Been at about a year and a half, and he's stationed at Camp Lejeune. So he told me to tell you Semper Fi.
Well, tell him Semper Fi, and I think he and I won't hold it against you that you were Army. You're kind of a brother in green, so we'll be okay with that, right?
Absolutely. I will say this: I love the Marine Corps as well. The Marines are a fine fighting force. So moving on a little bit. First off, we would like to say congratulations on your 2019 IDPA World Championship. Awesome job.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So on that as well, I've heard you talk about your preparation for major matches, specifically prior to your 2018 national title in IDPA. You spoke about shooting around 300 to 500 rounds about 2 times a week throughout the year, and then ramping that up to 5 to 6 times a week. What did your training schedule look like prior to 2019 IDPA Worlds?
No, that's actually a great question. I found that at this point in my life, at this age and this level of experience, I've kind of found a niche that really works for me in terms of training volume. And I'll give you a great example. I have the ability, theoretically, if I'm not on the road teaching a class, to go to the range 5 days a week or more. I could go to the range 6 days a week. I could get up in the morning. I could maybe do a couple emails and handle some customer service stuff, go straight to the range and train. But I haven't found that I have the ability to focus on and train as intently as I would like to if I went 5 days a week, for example. So for me, being prepared across the board and shooting all of the time is a much better way for me to train than, for example, trying to cram a bunch of stuff in. And I'm also someone, a lot of times I tell this to my students in the pre-part of the class. In terms of work, I'm not the star quarterback. I'm not the high school athlete. I'm not the person that was like super graduate that was, everybody loved and all the cheerleaders wanted to get to know or whatever else. I'm the dude, kind of the gray man guy that had to work for everything that I have. Every single skill that I have is a result of countless repetitions. So I found that if I'm always on the range on a regular basis, doesn't need to be 5 days a week or even 4 days a week, but I'm constantly training and refining and doing it in a manner where I'm very persistent in trying to gain additional skill. Because remember, you could send a monkey to the range that could shoot 200, 300, 500 rounds, but I'm trying to intelligently connect with what I'm doing, trying to better myself. So anyways, to answer your question, 2 days a week, and I do that literally as soon as the nationals are over, like this last world championship, or Actually, we shot the Worlds, and then I went down and shot the USPSA Nationals and placed in the top 5. And got back, and I'm shooting. I'll be shooting probably tomorrow morning, actually. My Tuesdays and Thursdays are normally my shooting days. The other days I do combatives and some other things. And then right before the match, I normally crank it up to 3, 4, maybe even 5 days a week, depending on my mental focus. So in 2019, my preparation was very much the same as 2018. And I don't anticipate that ever changing. That seems to really work for me.
Yeah, it seems to be a winning model, literally. So that does seem like you found, like you said, your niche. I would say this now. Granted, I'm not a professional shooter like you. Back when I was fairly competitive, especially which we're going to talk about Mike Brown here later in the show, but he kind of hit on those diminishing returns that happen with some people. I did find that beyond a certain round count and beyond a certain amount of days at the range, I did feel like there was that threshold for me. And you may not have that, and maybe that's one of the things that separates you. But I do believe, do you believe that some shooters have kind of that, diminishing return to where, go ahead.
I do, absolutely. I know exactly what you're asking, and I absolutely agree with that. But I would tell people that are listening right now, and you all, that if we get better at truly listening to our inner, I don't know if our inner voice sounds too weird and kind of dorky, but that inner voice that's telling you, man, I'm in this groove where I'm learning and I'm myelinating nerve pathways. I'm getting something out of this. That might be the day where you shoot until the ammo box is empty. And then on other days where it's like, man, it's just not here for me. Okay, well, that's the day. Then spend some time finicking with your gear and zeroing guns and whatever else. And I think that's one of the keys, is to start listening to what we know. I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned in the last 3 or 4 years is you already know a lot of the things you need to do. You already know what works for you if you listen to your intuition. And when I'm speaking to this part of the audience, I'm probably speaking to someone that's maybe been around a little bit longer, a little wiser. So if you're younger and you don't know, well, then continue to train until you figure that out. But pay attention to the little signals that tell you, hey, today is a 700-round session. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to work a little bit, then I'm going to stop for some water, and I'm going to hit it again. But I would tell you, you guys also, that most of my practices are between 300 and 500 rounds. That's it. I am not burned out after that, but I'm not going to push much and learn much beyond that. And I've got to be super careful not to just shoot. There's a big difference between practicing. Some people call it training. I think there's an interchangeable use there, and just shooting to make the gun go bang. That's not what I'm there for,
Even those of us that, are, we shoot, to gain proficiency, and we like to compete and do well. But I do certainly know that we go out with intention. I mean, Brian and I just did some training this weekend. We try to shoot, we prescribe drills every week, or at least most of the time. And for our accountability piece of the week, we make sure that we get out and do that. So Brian and I went out, did our weekly session, and we had a plan. There were only some certain things that we were going to work on, and we did that. So no doubt you have the same, and I know you do, because I've heard you speak about it.
I do always have a plan, but my plan now is more loosely based around feel. Where if you did any of my training programs, like the original competition handgun program, IDPA Mastery, any of the programs that I've written, those are very specific. But think about this for a second. Those plans are more designed to allow someone to follow a path that facilitates learning. The plan could be changed. I could have done it different ways. I could have been like, okay, instead of doing 3 days a week, we're doing 2, but we're doing longer sessions, or maybe 4 days a week, and we're going to do 2 dry fire, 2 live. I think there are a lot of variances, maybe if that's the correct word, to how the plan could be broken down or designed. But when someone has a path to follow, it's almost like a well-designed fitness program that is measurable and meets what you need. Now we have something to follow, and as we follow that, we learn along the way. And we might find that, okay, this isn't really working for me, or this is working for me. But interesting. At this point in my training, I'm a little bit more intuitive in terms of what do I need to see and do. I'm doing little teeny tiny micro reps of trying to settle a gun better and shoot it faster and learn timing and learn why the gun's moving, where it's moving, and why it's not moving sometimes when it's not moving. And those things that might seem to be so minute and far-fetched that most people wouldn't even understand what I'm trying to focus on.
Well, hey, Mike, it's Aaron here. Just a kind of a follow-up on that same topic. Now, I can say that tomorrow I'm going to head to the range. I've got my ammo loaded up, actually just loaded it up right before we got on here. So I can literally spend about 45 minutes and about 150 rounds. And I'm specifically just going to work on gripping my gun extremely hard. And I'm going to watch my sight, my front sight, and then my trigger in that order of priority. And I'm literally just going to shoot the best that I can with those things in mind at a still target, so I don't have to mess with targets. That's just what I'm doing lately because of some inconsistencies in my shooting. So along those lines, when you were prepping for these matches, is there anything that minute that you're focusing on?
No, I think you are exactly right. I think that's exactly the way to approach your practice. I would be very careful not to limit certain things. Like, for example, when you say that, and this is me being the over-analytical instructor, picking out small details, you say, I'm going to work on my grip and I'm going to focus on my front sight. Well, the reality is, based on the still target you're trying to hit, you're focusing on the front sight doesn't allow you to hit the target. Focusing on aiming allows you to hit the target. My buddy Rob Latham and I talk about that all the time in some of the classes we co-teach. And I think his aiming his uses video is famous for that. But the point is, we're always paying attention to the relationship of the front rear sight and the target itself. Or in the case of a gun where it has a dot on it, what the dot is doing and how the dot is moving. But having said that, I think that's exactly what you need to do. I think that less is more. And if I had to self-critique, like my original program is a book called Your Competition Handgun Training Program. It's the biggest, most robust thing I've ever done to date. I've revised the book and all that good stuff. But that said, if I had to do anything, I think I would probably take that program and focus on less. I think less is more. So when you give yourself a specific goal, let's say, like you said, recoil management or whatever else. Well, what are we trying to accomplish in that shooting session? Well, I'm trying to control the recoil of the handgun. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means I'm trying to control the movement of the handgun as it recoils. Like, how far does the front sight move? When the slide cycles, or I guess if you're shooting a revolver, it may change. What does it look like when it moves, right? And then the second thing is, how do I get it to return as fast as possible, and most importantly, to the exact same spot that I was aiming at? Because assuming, here we go down this rabbit hole, assuming that I was aiming the handgun at the right spot in the first place, if it returns that spot, I can shoot a second or third or fourth shot. Second shot for a competitive shooter, maybe third or fourth or fifth shot for a defensive shooter. That means something. And then literally having the discipline and the relaxed mindset to go, okay, I'm going to try different things. Now I'm going to loosen my grip and fire a couple shots. Now I'm going to tighten my grip and fire a couple shots. Now I'm going to squeeze my left hand. Now I'm going to squeeze my right hand. Now I'm going to press my palms together and watch what the gun tells you. Because here's the cool thing about this, guys. The gun is telling you a secret every time you shoot it. If you open your eyes and your nerve endings to it, it will teach you how to shoot better. Think about that.
That's awesome.
Well, Mike, if I can add something to that real quick, and then Aaron has another question for you. One of the drills that we used in our last class that we did, and I have to give full credit to Frank Proctor. He calls it his scene drill. And what you were describing, probably even a little more detail, but we use a white sheet of paper and tell the clientele that we do not care where the rounds go right now. All we want you to do is tell us what the sights are doing, how they're tracking, Are they tracking up and to the right? Are they returning back to the center where you, just like you said, aim before? What are they telling you? And that's kind of what you're hitting on, right?
You are all over it, man. You guys are doing the right thing. And nobody figured this stuff out that we could probably put a specific label on, like it was Frank's or Rob's or Mike's or Bill's drill. But somewhere, sometime in the past, someone started shooting a handgun and going, well, it's doing this right now. And they probably, intelligently enough, like you guys are doing, said, you know what, if I stop focusing so much on the damn target and the bullet hole in the center or wherever, I'll start actually paying attention to what the sights are doing during the entire recoil path, or at least as much visually as my eyes will allow me to focus on them. It's funny, you guys do it on a white target. I've heard people do it on the background. My buddy Phil Strader and I and myself currently, a lot of times I'll just tell students, aim between the targets. Matter of fact, if they're really focused on their hits and they're so worried about that, I'll be like, stop. The target doesn't exist. I'll go kick the target down. Say, all right, guys, gals, here's the deal. Shoot the gun. Watch what the gun does. Okay? Now shoot the gun and feel what the gun does. Now shoot the gun and watch and feel what the gun does. Oh, what is it teaching you? Oh, well, it's doing this or it's doing this. There you go. Now you're watching. Because remember, once again, the gun's telling you something every time you fire it. It's your job to react to that, right?
Absolutely. And Aaron, I think, speaking about some of the classes he's had recently with Mike Brown, Mike Brown has been phrasing it. Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong. He's saying simply read the sights.
Most definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Read the sights and their relationship to the target and what's going on. I don't think it could be said much different than that. It's a matter of processing the information that's in front of you. What's in front of you? Well, the target's in front of you. The gun's in front of you. The front sight, the rear sight. The slide itself is in front of you. Your hands are in front of you. Like if you all point your finger right now in front of you and then angle the finger left, right, up, and down, guess what? The finger is angled left, right, up, or down. That's reading the gun. That's reading the sights. Call it whatever you want, but you're taking the information that's in front of you and observing it. And then when you really start to open your awareness, then you can start talking about cool stuff like, well, I was watching the front sight and the rear sight on the target and calling perfect shots, and there was a bird that flew by way above my vision. Of course, that's Brian Eno's kind of stuff, but you're watching.
Absolutely. I read his book, and this discussion really sounds a lot like Brian Eno's for sure.
Yeah, he just learned to observe, man. That's when it becomes fun.
Guys, this is great. I really love where this is going in a direction, but I can so relate to what you're talking about, because the first time I was ever advised, go home, shoot some bill drills, and I'm all like, this seems silly. And then I saw brass leaving my gun.
Yeah, that's right.
I saw a muzzle flash. I had never seen those things, and I paid attention. And the point wasn't to get the best score. The point was to empty the gun, but pay attention during the process. So it was more about being observant in the exercise than the exercise itself.
That's right. Yeah, watching, paying attention. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. This is I really, like I said, I like where this is going, but I'm gonna drag you in a little different direction. We're gonna keep you on shooting, but because we want to really get deep in that, because how well you do it. When you are at a match and you're walking up to the stage, obviously these aren't usually blind or anything, but what does your stage prep consist of? When the squad walks up and you go through it, what is your process? I mean, obviously you're doing some visualization, etc., but if you could just walk us through that briefly.
So if I've done my job, the stage prep probably predates when I walk onto the stage. I probably know the stage before I get there, if I've done my job. Well, let me put it this way. If I've done my job and have the ability to do it as thoroughly as I want. Sometimes you can't simply go and walk the stages. You can't scout them. You can't look at them. But if I've done my job and had the ability, then I already know the stage. I already have kind of an idea of where I'm going to shoot how I'm going to shoot it, where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, where what I call the speed bumps in the stage are. And I call that the recon phase. You guys will be familiar with that with, military guys. Recon, we're reconning the stage, right? I think that's the thing that people forget is reconnaissance is to develop a plan. We don't develop the plan pre-recon. We recon first to get information, and then we develop a plan itself. And then when I get to the stage, then I start to go a little bit deeper. For example, asking other shooters that are at my level, or honestly, to be very honest with you, way below my level. I have, it's so funny, man. I've been on a stage with a group of guys, and as a top level national shooter, right? And some dude that's a C class or a marksman or whatever will be like, "Oh, why are you shooting like that?" I'm thinking about doing this. And I'll be like, heck, that's a pretty dang good idea. So I don't ever automatically assume that I know better than anybody else. That's foolish. I'm just not that kind of guy. So I look around and I look at what the other, competitors or teammates are doing, and then I solidify the plan. Now, once the plan is solid, then I'm going to start visualizing and running the stage in my mind. I'm going to see it in multiple person views, but I'm going to see everything that I need to see that's important in the stage. So that should, for people that are listening right now, that should look like you're looking through the lens of a camera, but you're also feeling the gun. You're trying to connect as many of those neural pathways, if that's even the proper statement, with what you're about to do. Like if you know to hit a really hard shot on the head or a steel target or whatever, that you've got to feel that trigger prep to slow the guns moving down, to give you a second to settle the sights and fix the sights, then in your visualization, you should be visualizing that sensation. And I run it over and over again. And I a lot of times I'll get a group of students and I'll say, all right, folks, this isn't a competitive class. If you visualize a stage before you shoot it, raise your hand. And most of them will raise their hand. Then I'll say, okay, if you visualize a stage 3 times before you shoot it, raise your hand. And a few people will raise their hand. Then I'll say, okay, 5 or 6 times or more. And then maybe 3, 4 people out of a group of 15 people will raise their hand. Then I'll say, all right, if you visualize the stage more than 10 times, raise your hand. And I'll say, okay, here's the deal. Hardly any of you are raising your hand right now. But if I had a mirrored group of 15 of the top shooters in the nation right now standing next to you, all 15 of those folks would be raising their hand. What does that tell you? And they're like, oh, wow. Well, visualization must be important. So once I have the plan, I run it over and over again. How often do I run it? As many times as I can until it's my turn to shoot. I don't stop. So that's a defining difference between a lot of people that get lost on a stage. I don't stop because I want to memorize it and refine it, because every time you run that visualization in your mind, you're practicing the stage, right? Your mind doesn't realize it's not. And then, I have a little bit of a pre-execution. I mean, I try to load the gun the same way, but those aren't really things that I do at the match, like from the design standpoint. I've done those in practice. So when I load and get ready in practice, I do the same thing. Why? Because when I go to the match, I want it to be consistent, because I want to put my mind in that nice, relaxed consistency space. I don't want to be in a space where my brain goes, this is different. I'm not comfortable with this. You know what I'm saying?
Nice. No, that's, and I'm guilting myself of that, walking through it a few times and then just waiting for my turn, So that's huge.
I think a word I would give to you, one more thing, is I work the match. I don't shoot it. I'm working. So when you envision, what's my job? I'm working now. Now I'm working. It's a mission-oriented thing. I'm working the entire time. No, I'm not just there smoking and joking and shooting. I'm working the entire time. So that process, I think, maybe mentally should stimulate what I'm trying to focus on. It's like I'm working the entire time. Even post-stage, I get done shooting the stage, I grab my magazines, I check my score, sign my score sheet. Maybe if I have a notebook, I reflect anything that was difficult on that stage, and then I start the prep for the next stage. It's no hanging out, talking about dinner. I'm working toward the next stage.
That's good. I like that. So have you determined if it's the sound of the audio or the guy pushing the button or the way he says make ready, but why do we forget the plan as soon as the timer beeps?
Man, that's a great question, actually. And I would tell you that if you've done a good planning process and visualized enough, that you probably won't forget the plan. So I'm thinking back in my mind right now as you ask that, because there are stages, as a guy that was in the top 10 in the nationals years and years and years ago, where I ran by a target. So it's like, how's that possible? But I would tell you, if I reflected upon those circumstances, I'm going to bet you I did not visualize like I needed to. So when I say that, let me throw this out there for those that happen to be listening. If you can't turn around, face away from the stage, close your eyes with your earmuffs on so there's no noise, and run the entire thing and know what the target arrays look like. So you guys know that, like, when I get into a position, let's say it's a small window and there are 3 targets in there, I know that the right one is wide open. I know that the center one has a non-threat or a no-shoot a little bit low, so I'm going to have to aim in the upper portion of the chest, probably on the AC or the 0-1 line. And the right one is a headshot only. If you can't picture that, if you can't run that entire stage in your mind, you don't actually have a plan that you visualized well. So I would submit the people that we call that the brain scrambler when the timer goes off. If you lose your place, then you've not practiced visualizing and you're not executing at the match. You're just kind of coming up with a plan and hoping you execute it. You're not coming up with a plan and ingraining it in your brain. It's a memorization deal. It's like when you went to school and you had to learn all of the state capitals, right? You had to physically memorize. You had to move the elastic part of your brain or whatever and force that information in there until all of a sudden, boom, you couldn't get it wrong. You knew the capital of whatever was whatever. You know what I'm saying?
I like that as an answer, because I've asked other people the same thing, and you can talk about being nervous, or if you haven't shot a lot of matches, you're going to react differently, but that really is putting the work in before that timer goes off is what's going to let you do that. That is, I love that response. That is exactly what I wanted to hear, because what you've done is you've not only let us know it's your fault.
That's right.
But you can fix it.
You can. It's
yes.
you're not trying to succeed. You're trying to prevent failure. You're trying to prevent you can't get it wrong at this point. I know this stage so good. I can't get it wrong. I can't get it wrong. I can't. You know what I'm saying? And then that also frees your conscious mind up to execute other things. Like, oh crap, something went bad. I missed a steal. That's going to affect my load. So my conscious mind can very quickly pick up the pace a little bit. And I do visualize, if this, then that. Okay, if this happens, then I'm going to do this. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. Or on this one, this is the piece of steel that I have to hit. There's no arguable. It's not, I want to hit it. I want to shoot at it. I have to hit it. So I have to do everything necessary to hit it.
Awesome. Well, I think Aaron's going to take us in a slightly different direction here for a second.
So, hey, Mike, how important is physical fitness to competitive success?
I think that a lot of people are asking for a fitness solution to a shooting event, and I would be careful with that line. I spent years of my life trying to beat better shooters by being more physically fit. Here's the deal. You can't do it. However, if you're focusing your time and energy on being the best shooter you can, being as good of a shot as you possibly can, being fitter is better. Being lighter, more flexible, and having what I would maybe describe as a higher strength to weight ratio, so you can physically move faster, is a no-brainer. If I can physically move from position A to position B, I'm going to beat you, assuming we're the same level of shooters. However, you may be able to beat me to the next position, but if you miss a shot, one shot, I've evened it out. Doesn't matter. So you got to be a good shot first. But fitness is important, I think, very important, and I still work on it.
Well, Mike, I will kind of circle back to your visualization discussion. What I would say is that was such a superb example of how to think about it, and it really was something that hit me as you were saying it. I have not been as competitive in IDPA in recent years until we started this venture. It made us start shooting a lot more. And, back when I worked with Mike, I was pretty competitive. And that's one of the areas he really, really worked with me on. But I would say that your description was just even that much more concise with the way that I could think about it. And also the last match that I had was like, you know what? There were a couple of the stages that I did not visualize enough. And that's going to change my next match. And I would say that the audience out there should benefit greatly from that description. Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope so.
So speaking of Mike, I met Mike when he was a rookie police officer at Gibson's Martial Arts back in 95 or 96. I mean, Mike was, like I said, a rookie. I mean, at that point, I was even out shooting Mike in IDPA, which really, at that point, he was just really starting to figure out that it's like, man, I'm going to seek out instruction. And, not a lot of people knew how Mike was diving into shooting. And then it became really evident as he started to beat everybody and nobody was beating him. So that said, I'll just hit this too. I mean, Mike's been such an influence on myself. I mean, he introduced me to Craig Douglas, introduced me to some of the best people that have helped me in my path. How did you meet Mike, and what is your current relationship with him?
Well, I am trying to think of the very first time I might have met him, and it was probably, I would assume, in the old office at it was actually the Fee Oil and Gas Building, I think, back before we started and had to finish the range at the U.S. Shooting Academy, where Mike Brown was a friend of Brian Hills, who's, as you guys may or may not know, a local Tulsa guy.
Oh, I know Brian real well.
Yeah,
Yep.
Then so Mike was like, hey, we got to bring this guy in along with his partner in crime, and they're going to maybe help us develop a course called CQT, which is based on some stuff that a guy named Craig Douglas does. Of course, at that point in time, I didn't know who Craig Douglas was. I didn't know who Mike was. His partner in crime was Brandon Bennett, who is one of the single most skilled and freakishly strong, scary, unassuming dudes I've ever met. Anyways, they came in and we started talking, and we started immediately talking about like close quarter shooting positions and stuff like that, and weapon retention drills and things that I thought I knew from being a police officer and then being a FAM, and then things that he was saying, man, we're doing something totally different. And I came in as a GS-13 with the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, formerly the lead instructor of the FAMs. And this Tulsa PD guy is telling me like, well, no, let's do think about this for a second. What? And I'm like, nah, I'm not sure about that. Anyways, long term certainly won me over. And at that point in time, I don't know how much jiu-jitsu training and stuff that he was doing. I know he was doing combatives, but got to know him certainly very well. He was one of my adjunct instructors at USSA. And then, man, we've known each other for years. Now he's currently one of my coaches at Clinch MMA in Owasso. He's a dude that gets on and crushes me on a regular basis and teaches me the little fine details of the things I'm doing wrong. And we've known each other for a long, long time now, I would expect.
Well, that's real cool. And I have to circle back to Brandon Bennett. So Brandon he and I were instructors at Gibson's together, but here's where the connection was. He was there before me, quite a bit more experienced than I was, but he was the last sparring round for my instructor / black belt there at Gibson's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He beat the daylights out of me. We had pretty damn good contact there. And I remember he passed my guard. It was an MMA round, and he passed my guard. and mounted me and just freaking went to town. But it was a worthy test, that's for sure. So Brandon is an incredible guy.
Oh, he's beyond incredible. He is an anomaly. Your listeners, I think everybody has stories about, that one guy. Well, Brandon is really that one guy. He is, and you would never, as you know, you would never ever look at Brandon Bennett and say, man, this guy could put a can of whoop, but he just freakishly strong and flexible. And I don't know, it's a weird thing, man. I don't believe in a lot of mystic stuff. When you grab a hold of Brandon, it's like, what did I just grab a hold of? What is this? I don't even understand what this is, And I'm a big guy, so that doesn't make any sense to me.
Very cool, man. I love talking about Brandon. Brandon, if you hear this show, brother, miss you, man. Aaron, what you got?
So bear with me as I kind of take a little bit different direction here. So I don't remember when and how I discovered American Warrior Society in your show, but I'll tell you right off the bat, I was a fan. And I mean, because there was high quality information, high quality guests, and it was all tested information, and delivered specifically with a rare and apparent humility. And, just after listening to you guys for a while, and I would sit there and drive down the road and think, man, these guys are so great. I need to send them some money and join up AWS. And, probably 2 years into it, I finally broke down and I got my coin $5.79.
I love it.
And I'm now a lifetime member. And again, it was more than anything, I wanted to support you guys because of how much you were giving to regular folks, and how much they could learn from you if they just listened. So just again, thank you for starting that. Now, regarding Evolution Security, our show here, we definitely believe we mirror yours and Rich's philosophy of the complete defensive package, with fitness, jiu-jitsu, integration, even home security. And, frankly, your podcast has been a huge influence on how we got started and how we handle things. And I'm circling back the fact that you guys gave away so much valuable information, including free info from videos and books, that most shooters and experts would completely reserve for paying customers. So I say all that to ask you, kind of talking shop for guys like us that have a show. Do you remember when the vision for AWS was birthed, and what were the primary drivers, to start that up?
Well, first of all, thank you for all those kind of words. And the more I hear what you just said, the more it motivates me to do more of what I do. Because, you said that, after years of consuming, you're like, man, I really want to be part of this. And I'm thankful you're a Coin member. And thankfully you took that step, because that opens the gate for all of the other stuff inside that are what I would describe as more logical, dedicated training programs, as you know. But the start of AWS was actually in the making for years, when I was like, well, first of all, number one, we had a lot of different situations, crime and some active shooting situations, and some different things that I'm like, man, one person that has a decent level of skill, maybe not even trains anywhere near as much as I do, could have affected the outcome. So I need to do some sort of force multiplier challenge. And then for the longest period of time, I actually, on the internet, on Facebook, gave away my defensive handgun training program. I got an email address out of it, and then I tried to market other things to the folks that signed up. But they got a free download of the entire book that you could buy for whatever it was then, $25 or $27 on Amazon. And my whole goal was to get people interested in that training information. And personally, I think my defensive handgun training program is one of the better works I've ever put out, although believe it or not, it still sells less than the competitive training program, which is weird. And it talks a lot about how people are driven by hobbies. But the point there is, then later on, what I really, really wanted to do was create that same environment for people that felt like you all do. I could tell by the way you communicate, your tone, your voice, that I want basically a troll-free a group of like-minded individuals that have the same goal, that are perfectly okay with having disagreements and disagreeing on a piece of gear or technique, but they can have a logical discussion on those pieces of gear and technique to evolve and to end up with an answer without being some jackass troll on the internet. So initially it's like, I'm going to put all my stuff in one area and no trolls, because I can delete all trolls. And then I want to influence as many people as possible to do this. And believe it or not, the initial American Warrior Society, I was going to give it away as a membership site for free. And then thinking I could sell advertisements, on the side of the web pages and stuff like that. And then I'm like, and then Rich kind of convinced me. It's like, no, if we do that, it certainly may grow. There's a revenue model there, like the magazine subscription, but then you are at the control or the will of those individuals, where we at AWS want to be able to say, that's a junk holster. I don't care if you're a company that I like. Hey, company that I like, you're making a junk holster. Stop doing that, because I'm not going to promote it. So that's when we finally decided to do the actual membership model. And then, of course, the logo has a very specific design, as you guys may know. The coin is an individual identifier that says, hey, man, I'm 531. I'm coin number 4. I'm coin number 1,300, whatever it is. That's a lot of people really identify with that number. And a lot of people end up with a coin that roll right back out of the membership and lose access, or a lot of times would leave access. But the point there is, once you're a coin member, you've taken that step. We're really hoping you've used the information to train and become better at a society member. But wherever you go after that is completely up to you. There's no pressure. We're not into giving people pressure. That's fine. Cancel your membership. You're still a coin member. You're still in our hearts. You still are out there saying, I'm going to try to defend other people, myself, my family. I might defend your family. You might defend mine. So that was the starting point of AWS.
Well, Mike, that's go ahead, Aaron. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, because I'm holding my coin in my hand, and I'll tell you, I have not noticed this statement on the back of it, and it sounds like exactly what you were talking about, and I love it. It says Warriors Wanted.
Bingo.
It's just neat hearing the way you thought of it. I've heard you talk about force multipliers, but not articulated the way you just did, that you thought, hey, there's some information that me and other experts in the field can offer to people that can save lives. Bingo. And they don't have to be ninjas, Navy SEALs, Delta Force. They can be a guy that can run a pistol and run a rifle at a mid-level, average level, but above average, because they've been listening to your content, getting your content, and listening to your guests. So it's awesome, and of course, we delved into that ourselves, and we're trying to mimic that, and we're trying to take a little bit different approach to it. But I mean, there's just so much good information that a lot of people just eat it up.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And the force multiplier thing is super important. I'm glad you caught that, because like when I did that originally, like I said, I'm like, how do I help? How do I motivate people? Well, let me do force multiplier. And then for a while, I'm like, well, okay, I know my competitive book sells better, so I'm going to sucker people into competing, and they won't even know it, but they're now becoming force multipliers, because once they're hooked, they're going to want to practice and train all the time, and they're going to be better shooters. I know for a fact. I've seen it. I've been there. It's not an arguable. You can't argue with that. So I did that for a long time. And then, of course, recently, I guess it was less than recently, 3 or whatever it was now, 4 years ago, another attempt, and I've done this whole force multiplier concept multiple times if people would look at my history. I started the Facebook Lives, and back in the original DDCs, Daily Dry Fire Challenges, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, I was getting up at 6 a.m. and starting a live Facebook feed, and it was called Daily Dry Fire Challenge because I know everybody can dry fire. You can't give me an excuse. I don't have a range. I don't have ammo. My wife doesn't want me to go to the range. My husband doesn't want me to go to the range. Baloney. It's at 6 a.m. Now, of course, I don't do it 5 days a week anymore, but that was another force multiplier attempt of mine to go, hey, let's stop making excuses and start making repetitions,
Well, Mike, superb answer on why you guys started AWS. I mean, that really pumps me up hearing that. And, frankly, that is what we need. We need force multipliers. We need individuals that want to help others. And frankly, it's a national security factor. We need capable people, if it be law enforcement, military, and civilian. So that was a really good synopsis of how you guys got started. And I'll kind of hit on one point that you made. And I'll digress a second. I was one of those that got the the defensive handgun book for free. I was one of those folks, and I think that's what kind of got me on the road. I mean, I knew about you beforehand for quite a while, but that definitely brought me in. So, but that said, this is kind of still moving in the same direction as the previous question, but a different take. My brother and I, when we first started this venture with Brian, we were just kind of discussing a few things over the phone and thinking about, okay, why was it that we were doing it? And individually, I said to him, Aaron, I believe that this is simply a launching board for us to get better at what's important, and hopefully that it'll help others as well. But I'd like to know, do you believe that AWS has been a catalyst for you and Rich to get better at what's important as well?
Yeah, that's another great question. Anytime you are trying to lead something as an instructor, as a mentor, as a coach, as a father, you have to think about what you're doing. So you have to become self-reflective. And anytime you're self-reflective, you're going to get better at what you're doing. I remember years ago I got a black belt in a striking art, right? Okay, I'm not anywhere near that with jiu-jitsu, but I got a black belt, and as soon as I did, it was like, my instructor would have me start teaching some of the different things. And teaching things is completely different than doing things. You have to think through what you're doing. You have to remember what the important parts of those things are. So absolutely, as one of the leaders of AWS, it absolutely has been a catalyst for us getting better. I was always on the range on a regular basis. I was doing some martial arts and lifting, but I did more of it, and I did it in a specific manner and focused on things like maybe the medical side and having tourniquets where I need to and being able to put them on with either arm. And a lot of that came from listening to guests on my shows and then having experts in the videos that are in the training videos in the membership vault going, hey, do this, do this, do this, and I got to listen to it and think, oh crap, I need to practice that. I need to try that. That's important to me. So absolutely, I think it's made Rich and I both better.
Well, we see it as well. Not that you guys weren't performing at a high level beforehand, but at least anecdotally, being a fan of you guys and following what you do, it does seem to be that, for lack of a better term, what it did for us is it caused us to be more accountable and caused us to double down on what we were doing prior. And so, yeah, I personally think that I see that in you guys. With that said, Brian, I think you got a question.
Yeah, the three of us on the EvoSec crew have certain things that we do weekly. Like, I do CrossFit. Eric does some, cardio training. All three of us do jujitsu. We all get to the range, and we all kind of have like a template for the week, to get to each of those things: dry fire, read and shoot, and of course that flexes, a little bit with what our focus is. I'm trying to get a stripe in jiu-jitsu right now, so I'm kind of focusing there. But what does a typical week of training look like for you in a full defensive package? Not just your shooting, but what do you do in a week on an average week?
Yeah. My weeks are pretty unique in that I try to keep them very consistent, assuming that I'm not traveling. So if I'm traveling, let's just take that off the plate, because if I'm traveling, then things change, obviously. And if I'm traveling, I'm there to teach a class or do whatever I'm doing. So I focus on that thing. And when I'm doing that, I'm probably doing all the drills for the students anyways, which means that in the motel, I'll do some morning workouts. But let's talk about my normal training week. I am a huge fan, and I do not know why, of order and a logical flow of my week. Like, for example, if I go to the range 2 days a week and I do combatives, jiu-jitsu, and lift, let's say 3 to 4 days a week. If you intermingled those days differently each week, I'd go berserk. It wouldn't work for me. It just doesn't work well. I don't know why. My brain doesn't like that. So my normal week is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are combatives / maybe I might do a strike workout. More often than not, I'll probably be on the mats doing an MMA or a BJJ type workout, grappling, no gi or gi. I do 1 to 2 strike workouts a week, assuming my hands and my shoulders and everything are healthy. So I have a bob, and I do a pretty specific routine where I'm working on upper body strikes and lower body strikes and knees and elbows and positioning, just to keep the power there. And then I supplement those combatives sessions with very specific workouts to try to increase my strength as much as possible. Matter of fact, I'm just out of the shooting season, so now I'm going to start my strength and conditioning cycle again, which I'm actually working with one of my recent guests on the podcast and reflecting on some of the things that I've learned from my buddy Jake Sines, and I'm getting back into that kind of stuff. Then 2 days a week, I'll hit the range. Tuesdays and Thursdays are typically range days. And I may flip-flop those sometimes, but I found that if Tuesday's a range day and Thursday's a range day, if I keep them range days, I know what I'm doing. I get up, have my coffee or whatever else. I prepped. I know what I'm doing. It just works better because I'm a big believer in the phrase that if everything is a priority, then nothing is. So my priority that day is to go to the range and improve my shooting skills. Now, if I have time afterwards, which I do, to do more office work, or maybe to do a range workout afterwards, do a little bit of supplemental something like with the TRX bands or some kettlebell swings, great. But my focus is the range. Now, on my combatives day, that's my focus. So after class, if like the guys are like, hey, let's do a couple extra rounds or a couple extra striking sessions, or work on this, or do some specific strength moves that are combative focused, then I do those things. So that's kind of how I balance it throughout, the week. And then I try to add lots of little things. Like, for example, during the shooting season, I don't need to work on my grip. I grip handguns every single day, literally, pretty much, in dry fire or live fire. During the non-shooting season, I may not grip the handgun as much. I'm not shooting quite as much. I may back off just a little bit. I may literally just do it the 2 days a week. I may not dry fire every day. So, I've got this, the Captains that Crush grippers in my truck, and I'll focus on working on that stuff when I'm driving. And then, of course, as you guys know, probably, when I'm driving, I'm listening to podcasts, and that's when I'm working on my education. Like, what's the next fitness thing I need to check out? What's the next technique I need to maybe experiment with on the range or whatever else. So that's kind of what my normal combative conditioning, jiu-jitsu, shooting week works like. And on the range, I'll be focusing on what I have coming up with. Maybe I'm shooting my carry gun that day. Maybe I'm shooting my carry gun and a rifle. Maybe I have a match coming up and I'm shooting probably that gun and doing a little bit of other stuff on the range. So.
Well, I like the way you mention how you like to focus on that day, what you're doing, because one of the things my lifting coach recently shared is, it's like you execute that lift with your whole life. You can't be thinking about what's for dinner or what you didn't get done at your desk and lifting. You actually have to be focused on that thing at that time and give everything into it, or you're not going to get the benefit out of it.
That mental focus and intensity is everything. In shooting, combatives, class of whatever kind of combatives class you're going to, be there and be present. And that's so easy to say on a podcast, but it's so hard to do in real life,
Yep. No, and when we lift and do the programming that I work with, and American Muscle is who we get our programming from, and I'm using my phone to do calculations of the percentages of the lifts we're doing, and quite honestly, I'm better off using a calculator because then I don't have my darn phone in my hand. Put that thing away. Get it as far away as you can. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what do you got going over there, Aaron?
To get to your level, I mean, you've been successful in a lot of endeavors. You said it was difficulty keeping a job, but when you really think about that, it's that you've been successful and your skills have been demanded. But along the way, you must have had some mentors. Could you maybe talk about some of your mentors? Would you like to delve into that a bit?
Yeah, I would. And I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to start there. From a general standpoint, certainly I had some great Marines that I worked with in the Marine Corps. After the Marine Corps, I have so many. It's hard to say, but I'll name some people that stand out. And if I miss some people along the way, then forgive me. Like a guy named Pete Garza. Was a great mentor, sheriff's deputy that ran the training academy back in the day. And he had two guys that worked under him that were very, very strong in terms of mentorship and taught me a lot of things about thinking and like ultra professionalism and combatives. I had some mentors in the police academy, probably 5 or 6 that I don't have time or probably couldn't remember all the names right now, that were very influential, both on the range in terms of that and as leaders. Later on in my career, after I moved upwards into the federal government, a guy named Brad DeLauder, a retired Force Recon Marine, was a mentor of mine. And, the ultimate man crusher. This dude was a guy that would go and run and swim and bike and bench press and pull up with anybody. And to this day, I've not seen anybody that can whip him across the board. Maybe the current CrossFitters could, but I doubt it. I'd be surprised in that case at the younger Brad DeLauder level. And there were also guys there, Mitch Levin and Ted Traver and Norm H. and some of the other guys from a special mission unit that were very strong mentors when I was at the Federal Air Marshal Academy. Great guys to learn from, guys that have been in some crazy stuff that I won't go into too many details on the podcast itself. And then kind of flowing into shooting, my first class, direct private class, was with Frank Garcia, who to an extent really treated me well and took me under his wing. And, we would meet up at matches, and I was a young like C-class shooter or D-class shooter. And he'd be like, yeah, come over to this mobile home and we're having dinner with all these other shooters. And he didn't need to do that kind of stuff, but taught me a lot of things. Learned a lot from my my buddy Phil Strader, believe it or not, one of my first sponsors. And I trained with about pretty much everybody out there, guys. I mean, I took classes with any of the top shooters that were out there at the time. I took classes with them. So they're all my mentors, but probably the single most profound direct shooting mentor I have would be Rob Latham. Once I met him and trained with him in a class, and then have spent hours and hours and hours talking to him, training with him, practicing with him, teaching with him now, and shooting with him, probably one of my primary shooting mentors. So those are some of just a few of the individuals I've learned from. Of course, I have to mention my buddy Rich Brown. Rich Brown is one of the single best instructors I've ever been around. So I learned a lot and stole a lot from him in terms of charisma and personality and instructing and how to deal with people. So yeah, actually, when I wrote a book called The Art of Instruction, and I tried to list a lot of the instructors and mentors that had influenced me, and it almost tanked me. I'm like, I can't believe it. There's too many. Too many people. When I started really thinking about some people that were like exceptional, and I think I got most of them in there, but maybe not all of them.
Hey, real quick, Mike, I just have to ask this. Does Rich ever get mad?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Does Rich Brown get mad? Yes, he gets mad. Ask him about his big old broken knuckle for a couple of years that happened when he may be impacted with the car tire. Yeah, he does get mad. He's pretty well kept these days. He keeps a lid on it, but yeah, oh yes, he gets mad.
He just seems too nice. So it must just be a big facade then.
It's all a facade. He's faking that. He's not. That's not him. He's an angry man inside.
That's awesome. Mike, hearing your week, a lot of us kind of knew that would probably be the direction you went, but there was some cool detail in there. I'm coming off of a bad back injury, and so I'm trying to make the majority of my focus in my jiu-jitsu. I'm like the forever blue belt, so I'm trying to get my purple at some point, but my body's just now letting me train again decently in jiu-jitsu. So that sounds cool. Well, listen, I think we're going to let Aaron move this into more kind of like the close of the show and ask some questions in a totally different direction.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, Mike, real quick, a lot of shows shy away from the gear, but I'll tell you, sometimes we get into it. So it'd be awesome if you could give us a little bit of details into what you carry every day.
Man, I am currently carrying a aluminum frame Wilson Combat Compact 1911, an EDC 9, and I've been wearing actually one of their 1911s for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And understand, full disclosure, Wilson Combat is one of my sponsors. So people may say, "Well, he has to carry." No, they don't. They don't tell me what to carry. They tell me what to compete with. My contract says what I'm supposed to teach with. But they never would ever tell me what to carry, right? And I carry it because I love the guns. I trust the guns. I've shot them over and over again. And I know how to maintain and make a 1911 run. So I run a compact 1911 aluminum frame gun. Short. I don't run the EDC X9, which is the higher cap version. I run the single stack version, and I run 10 rounds in the gun. And I carry a spare 10 round magazine. So I've got 20 rounds typically on my body and some spare magazines in the car. I carry a wave opening pocket knife, normally one that was ground down and has a wave ground or spot on it that my buddy Mike Janich with Spyderco hooked me up with. And then, a micro streamlight flashlight of some variety of sort in my other pocket. And that is my typical EDC carry gear on a regular basis.
Awesome. It's funny. Sometimes I feel like I carry too much when I hear some guys like you. I saw something from Jeff Mao from Tennecore. He literally carries, I think, the exact same loadout as you, but a Glock. Is
that right? Yeah. Yeah, I carried a Shield for a long time. I carried an M&P 9C for a long time. I love both those guns. I would probably go back to maybe one of those varieties, although, the new 365 and the new Hellfire made by Springfield are both very interesting because they're so small, so lightweight. But at the same time, you got to carry a gun you can shoot. I wrote an article a long time ago called "You're Going to Be in a Gunfight Tomorrow," and it basically preempted, like, what if you knew you were going to be a gunfight? Would you carry that little compact pocket pistol with a double action crappy trigger on it, or would you pick something really a little easier to shoot? Like, really, what would you pick? You're going to be in a gunfight tomorrow. What would you pick? And so that's kind of the way I think about it. And my current carry 1911, I can shoot it nearly as good as I can shoot my full-size competition guns, which says a lot, but it's light, it's easy to conceal. Certainly it's a 1911, which I'm very familiar with. I'm literally shot probably hundreds of thousands of rounds through 1911.
Well, now I hate to put you on the spot here, but every now and then I've seen you over on the dark side with the Glock.
Well, here's the deal. I shoot Glocks on a regular basis. For example, in terms of my contract sponsorship, Wilson Combat does modified Glocks and does all kinds of really cool stuff. Matter of fact, I have an AWS logoed, I have three of them actually, Glocks, 26, 19, and a 17, which has an optic on it. So yeah, man, but I got my master class when I started competing with a Glock. I got all the way up to master class. That's all I shot. I shot initially a Glock 21, then I moved into a Glock 22. So I ran a Glock really well for years and years. I can still shoot a Glock pretty darn good. I don't carry a striker-fired pistol anymore. I carry in the Penix position. I've been influenced a little bit by my buddy Ernest Langdon, and kind of choose to carry in the Penix position with a manual safety firearm. If I went back to a Shield or like an MP9C or any of their variants, I would probably carry one with a thumb safety on it.
Well, good to hear. I just remember a couple years ago, I think Spencer Keepers was at a class with you, and somehow I saw a picture of you running a Glock, and I said something to him. Hey, Mike's running a Glock there. He goes, and he ran it damn well, too.
I can shoot a Glock okay.
Awesome. Well, so real quick, let's get a couple of these quick, fun questions done, and we appreciate your time. We're going a little bit over, so we appreciate that. Now, so what is your favorite regular day Mike Seeklander activity to do outside of shooting and martial arts?
Man, good one. Man, I'm a fan of good coffee and family time. So hanging out at a coffee shop, getting coffee, but that's not really a hobby. That's probably not a great answer. If I had,
it doesn't have to be a hobby. We want to know what you enjoy.
Well, that would be thing. You could take me to a good coffee shop, and I love that kind of deal. But if I'm in the area, if I'm in the right area, and Oklahoma is not really well known for this, but if I have my choice, I'd probably be up hiking or mountaineering or driving around the mountains. I do hunt when I have the opportunity. I don't hunt a lot in Oklahoma. I go home and help my mom hunt, and been down to Texas a couple times, but I'm not like an avid. I hunt for meat, but that's not necessarily my hobby. But up in the mountains, I'd be probably hiking and driving around, four-wheeling, exploring a mountaintop, climbing, looking around in the secluded woods somewhere. That would probably be what you find me doing.
Now, didn't you hunt a little bit with your cousin Todd Orr recently?
I have not actually hunted with Todd. I've been hiking with Todd a bunch of times. I was supposed to go out and elk hunt with him this year, and it fell through. He's obviously he's the hunter, one of the biggest hunters in the family. But I spend time with him every single year. But we do a lot of hiking and mountain and then climbing, and we climbed back Black Butte up where he is recently. And the year before, we hiked Bear Creek, which is Bear Creek. That's the creek that he was actually attacked by a grizzly bear. But I haven't actually hunted with him recently. The last hunting trip I was on was with my mom in Wyoming. So,
okay, well, and now here is one of my favorite questions, because I'm actually a musician. I like to say I'm a guitar player that moonlights as an accountant. But what are your three favorite musicians or bands? Sometimes that takes people off guard, but let's hear what you have to say.
That's a great question. And here's why. Because if you had Rich on and you asked him that, I'll give you an example. He and Todd, my cousin Todd, that you mentioned a second ago, play the music game. We're driving around the mountains and a radio song comes on and they try to guess the singer first. And I've never seen anybody beat Todd until Rich was in the car with him, where he knew every song, every artist ever. Like he never got one wrong. It's like if he has a weird superpower, that's what it is. I, on the other hand, could tell you, I could say people like Garth Brooks or George Strait for country. I could name some rock bands. I could name some popular new wave people that are on the radio, but I don't necessarily I don't necessarily attach myself to a specific band. I hear a song that I like, I'm like, I like that song. Hear a country song that I like that country song. And oftentimes I won't pay attention to who's singing the song. And if you play music sometimes, that probably drives you insane. Like Rich would know, oh, that's whoever, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm like, that's a pretty good song. Lately, old style hard rock. That's what's in my truck right now. But I don't know. I can't tell you my three favorite musicians or bands.
But you've still answered it. You've talked about the genres. No, not everybody is keyed in on specific artists, but the main thing is almost you're not going to find very many people that just say, no, I don't really like listening to music. Everybody likes music, and they at least have their favorite style. So, I mean, could you say what is your favorite genre to listen to?
Man, I can tell you what it is today. Right now, in the last couple months, hard rock on the radio, man. Hard old school rock. I don't know, what a 3.3 in Tulsa, whatever it is. But prior to that, it might have been 95.1 or 95.5, probably a country station for the longest period of time. I always liked the classic old school rocks, Bon Jovi, AC/DC, all the bands that were playing when I was in high school. Some of the harder stuff, not the super heavy metal stuff, but just good classic, hard and maybe a little bit softer rock. And I think that's where I'm kind of stuck in right now. But that could change tomorrow.
Well, that's a perfect answer, Mike. That gives listeners a idea. Again, we like to get some of this stuff out that guests and industry experts and world-class shooters such as yourself hear something that they normally don't talk about.
Well, I appreciate you asking, man. I've never been asked that question on a show, actually.
Well, I'm glad about that. I said we'd try and get some stuff out that you haven't talked about. So, Brian, you want to take us out of here, buddy?
Absolutely. So, we would be doing you a huge disservice if we did not let you crow just a little. You need to tell us where we can find you.
Man, probably the simplest thing. If you know my name, you can go to MikeSeeklander.com. That's the easiest one to remember. My original and primary website is shooting-performance.com. It branches off, and you can find everything to and including the American Warrior Society link, the American Competitive Shooter Society link, all the books, DVDs, everything I do, a web store. And, of course, if you want to go directly to AWS, which we've talked about a bunch on this show, or our podcast, you can go to AmericanWarriorShow.com or AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find either of those. So any of those sources, of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Rich and I have a couple different pages we maintain. We have some American Warrior Society pages, and of course, I have all my Mike Seeklander pages, including the company Shooting-Performance. But most of those have links to the other companies as well. We're constantly co-scheduling and co-promoting each other and making sure everything's married up.
Well, that's very awesome. And anybody that's just, listening to this podcast, highly recommend the podcast. And what will happen if you listen to that podcast is you will most likely go seek more information, because it is so, you offer it so well. That is like, the other guys had mentioned that what you guys bring to the table, I think compared to a lot of other folks, you really have a lot of content and a lot of meaningful content. So again, appreciate you guys providing that for us all.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you saying that. And it's, being on this show is awesome. And folks, if you like this show, you're probably going to like our show. We have some really, really super guests that will be able to teach you all kinds of stuff.
Well, if I can add real quick, and then again, I'll definitely pass it back to Brian to close out. The audience out there, please go and subscribe to the American Warrior Show and review and share. Mike's come on here supporting our show. We would like you guys to go ahead and do that and support Mike and Rich.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, that's been just a wonderful way to spend an evening, man. Great information. I really love the way we kind of generically, got some of that stuff. We had a bit of a script going in here, and boy, the way we started talking about the shooting stuff, I love the way that wound up. And this is definitely going to be a show I'll remember and listen to again. So again, thank you for coming out. We appreciate your time, and we're going to let you get back at it. So for us, that's it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I certainly appreciate it. Y'all stay safe out there.
All right.
Take care, Mike.
All right, Mike, thank you. Well, hey, guys, that was pretty incredible having Mike Seeklander on. I've been following him, as I talked about in the interview, for a long time, and have always been impressed with his humility. And in the pre-interview and in the show, man, he just seems so real. So it was neat to experience that, and man, we were so honored to have him on. So now, of course, we come to the accountability section of our show, and I'm going to go ahead and hit it off here. I've been behind on my JITs lately, so I'm really stoked to say that I made 2 JIT sessions this week. One with a really good friend named John that, I talked to him for years about these self-defense things, and man, all of a sudden he just really flipped the switch and has been digging deep. And so, man, I'm always stoked to see him at JITS. Man, he gets there more than me now. So, hey, John, shout out to you, buddy. So glad to see you the other night and get to roll with you. And then another time I got to roll with my wife, which I've said multiple times, she's better at JITS than me. And she was giving me compliments. She goes, "Man, this is the best you've ever done. I'm surprised. Good job, honey." So that's some nice encouragement, because I felt kind of inadequate lately because of how little I've been able to make it. Now, on to my dry fire. I did miss a day or two here and there, but I'm really refining my dry fire. I learned that I'm not focusing near enough or being purposeful enough. I kind of thought I was, but I really was not. Now I am having notes open with a plan of exactly what I'm going to work on in dry fire so I can stay more focused. And I'll tell you what I've been working on is doing rep after rep after rep of simply getting my hand on the gun. That has to be perfect every single time. And I've been inconsistent in that, so that's almost all I've worked on. But then towards the end, I will throw in some work. I'll just pull out of the holster, and I will work only on working that counter torsion grip that I learned from Mike Brown, and I'm just extending it out and squeezing the heck out of that. The best way I can describe it is you're taking that grip and almost like a roller pin rolling into that full extension. And man, you've got a tight grip on that pistol with some great recoil control. So now on to the drill of the week. I am quite embarrassed to admit this, and so our audience, you got to know that we are legit when we bring in accountability here. I showed up to the range ready to run our drill of the week that Eric prescribed, and I had 0 B8 targets with me. So, so I did not make the drill this week, but I still, of course, made my weekly trip to the range, and I did what I've been doing, which is simply a drill of gripping the pistol really hard, intense front sight reading, and then a smooth trigger pull in that order of priority. And it's been, the main thing is the grip, the grip is real important, but the main thing that I'm working on is really focusing on the sights and not leaving the front sight until the string is through. So guys, that's all I have for this week. How about you, Brian?
Well, I'll start off where you left off. And I as well did not shoot live fire this week. Well, I did not use shot like fire. I did not shoot the drill because I did not make it to the range at all. Now, I'm going today, but that does not make up for the fact that it has been over 7 days since we've sat down and done accountability, and that's a full week without shooting. So I'm going to work on that. It was had a midwinter getaway, so that's really kind of what dealt with that on Saturday and Sunday, which are the days that would typically be available for me to go to the range. I was out of town, so which was a good experience in itself. But I did still manage to get 3 early morning CrossFits in, 2 jiu-jitsu sessions, and 2 weightlifting sessions. We're currently working on a strength cycle in weightlifting, so the percentages are high and the reps are high. So, man, I think I have eaten more this week than I can recall at any time in recent history because we are really doing some work there, and that's cool. So it's a program that I do that's pre-prescribed, and it cycles up and down for what the intensity is, and we are in the meat of it right now. However, on that note of training and drilling, and received no compensation from these folks, and I have nothing to say yet, but I have chosen to take a step in promoting my dry fire, and I have actually ordered a system from Accelerated Firearm Training that actually allows you to use a cert gun as a dry fire training pistol, and they've got small rechargeable targets that actually read your hits. So I can actually work on my first shot timing. I can actually work on, shooting multiple targets under a time score. And it's just, again, there's no replacement for live fire, but it's going to give me the ability to push that in a way that I have not had the opportunity to do so, like inside my home before. So I'm pretty excited to see what I can do to work on my draw, and then also to work up on follow-up shots with that system. But more will be revealed, and we'll talk about it in future episodes to see if it's something that I feel was worth the money or not. But it's a pretty cool little system. So that's enough out of me. How about you, Eric?
Man, Brian, that's great information on your new dry firing tools. Man, I'm looking forward to a report on that. So for me this week, I want to hit on, and our audience has probably heard this several times throughout the time that we've been doing this show, is I had a horrendous back injury a year and a half ago. And I learned something about myself this week that I did not realize was a real factor. And Jocko Willink would probably strike me down for saying this, but there is a term called kinesiophobia, which is essentially the fear of movement. And typically this can prolong recovery from injuries. Now, what I realized is that it's probably been limiting me in a lot of things: my jiu-jitsu, my strength. So I started getting a lot more confidence in my rolling at jiu-jitsu and my strength workouts. So I decided not to do what I normally do in my workouts this week, which is I typically do a combination of strength and conditioning. I decided that all I'm going to do right now in my personal workouts is strength. And so this week, I did simply overhead press, squats, and pull-ups. That's it. And I use the starting strength prescription for sets, which I won't go into too much detail. That can be looked up. And I really realized that that's what I need to be doing to really get strong again. So that was actually kind of a neat epiphany. Now, granted, do I think I really have a phobia for movement? I'm not saying I do, but I realized that was hindering me some. Now, on to jiu-jitsu. So I've been a lot more consistent after being sick with going to jiu-jitsu. And again, that was also one of my other realizations with my sparring. So we've been working on a lot of X-Guard stuff, and that's been a lot of fun because, frankly, of all the years that I've been training in jiu-jitsu, I've not really done much X-Guard at all. So we kind of been diving deep into that. And actually, I want to give a shout out first to Professor Will Haggerty, who is my jiu-jitsu coach and Brian's, for the incredible and brilliant instruction that he provides us. And I also want to shout out to a good friend of mine, Aaron. I don't want to give his last name out there because, and that isn't my brother, I'm sorry, a buddy of mine who's a purple belt. I'll just call him Coach Aaron, who also gave me some awesome work in X-Guard and some ankle locks. So that was a lot of fun. So now, we're getting a theme here. I did not live fire this week. Now, I know Aaron
Holy
did.
crap.
What?
Yep. And so here we go. Let me say
It's
it.
a trifecta.
Hey, I shot,
Let me
though.
say it. Boo. I'm giving myself the boo. And so, yeah, I prescribed the drill, but I did not get to the drill this week. Now, I want to say this. We always strive to do each week jiu-jitsu workouts and shooting. That's our motif. I'll just say it the funny way. That is our motif each week, is to hit those. But sometimes we just can't do it, and sometimes our focus is elsewhere. So I want our audience out there to know that sometimes it's okay to focus on certain areas. But that said, I did dry fired 3 times, and I actually dry fired the drill of the week. So I did get some of that mental rehearsal in. So, and like Aaron, sometimes I do dry fire without a plan, but I like to go in knowing what I'm going to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. So that was a good enunciation of that, Aaron. So that's it for me on accountability this week. So I guess it's time to move back into doing the drill of the week. And this week I will be shooting this. So this is the 5-yard roundup by Justin Dial. Every string, there's 4 strings, is 2.5 second par time. And again, the drill says it's at 5 yards. The first string from concealment, draw, fire 1 shot into a B8 bull. Second string from a low ready, 4 shots. Again, under 2.5 seconds. The third string, 3 shots, strong hand only. And the fourth string is 2 shots, support hand only. So this next coming show, we'll have some accountability on that drill. So with that said, really appreciate hanging out with you guys. I mean, Mike Seeklander was an incredible guest. I mean, I learned so much. And again, like you said, Aaron, such a humble guy. And he and Rich Brown supporting us the way that they have. And we want to send out a thanks to those guys. So with that said, I guess we can go ahead and say good evening.
Well, I wanted to...
Hey, you guys take care.
Hold
go
on
ahead,
a
Aaron.
second. I just wanted to say this. On social media, maybe people have noticed that we've been working on tweaking some of our music. And first off, guys, hopefully people aren't getting tired of the music, but we'll be releasing some new music sometime soon. But one thing I'm excited about is a lot of people probably don't know that Eric is a professional drummer too. He hasn't been gigging lately, but he was also a professional drummer too, and I'm just stoked. He's been sending me some tracks from 1,500 miles away, and I've been tweaking those, and man, killer drum sound. So we're gonna listen to this, guys and gals, because Eric laid down his fat groove on there. So take a listen. He won't only kick your ass, he'll kick a groove. So you, so,
Nice.
but I can say goodbye because speaking
Aaron.
of gigs, I have to get to a gig, guys.
Oh, right on. Well, get on to your gig, brother.
Always wonderful seeing you guys. Over and out.
Take
All right,
care.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.